Good morning. Today we're going to be making it so we can update the user interface so it can support the new data we're working with inside our associated data project. So over here inside my model, we added the new data, in this case of candy rank, when we're using the 538 data set of what was the best candy for Halloween. And we'd already made it so we can have a struct that can read that, and we have a way of making it, handling it. And so in this case, this struct itself is only codable, so it does not have the identifiable marker, so I have to do some work with that. I have to make an associated value. So I made a struct. The struct is what's going to use to actually hold those pieces together. Each var that's inside the JSON has to have its associated value. You test this out just like we did with any other data you're working with, making sure you can read it properly from the JSON, using a playgrounds to make that happen. Now, once you've got your struct defined and you've got your JSON data, of course, you want to add that JSON data to your resources. I put mine here inside my data folder, inside the resources folder. You can see all the JSON file that goes along with it. It's all lovely separated out right there. And then I have, of course, my struct that's attached to it that explains all the pieces in there. And again, unless you're doing some complex things, each value inside your JSON needs an associated value or var attached to it right there. Next, inside there, we have to make our associated data store. The data store is what we're using so we can actually have a single reference of truth. Again, that's one of the SwiftUI's big things, is we only want to have one single value we're referencing. We're talking about data that we're working with. And so that's why you have to use a class for that, using the combine library. And we have a published var that we'll be referencing. In this case, it's called candy. It's just a list or an array of candy rank items. And I have a single init that initializes it either to a default value or passes it the candy rank array that I give it as an option. This just looks the exact same as what we did when we first did our version of the bucket store as well. The same basic approach. We then had our custom data. It was originally bucket data, and we renamed it so because it's doing now more than one thing. So we have a var in here, candy data, that uses initializes an array of candy ranks using the load 538 JSON. And that load 538 JSON is the same exact method as load JSON from our bucket list. However, instead of loading bucket list items like load JSON does, this one loads candy rank items. We also talk about this in class at how you could extend this by making it so it's a more generic method, and that would require use of the angle brackets or generifying the actual structure. And that'd be a great example of making this project a lot better and more extensible for the future. And we'll talk about that as an example of a possible project in second semester. But for now, we simply just made another method that works the exact same way but returns a different type with a different signature, just so we can have that making it happen. It just tries to decode the value and loads it into that associated list. If it fails, it simply just gives you an empty list. Not too bad to worry about, but it has some functionality, so we have that ready. Now that we have just that data set itself ready, we have to go ahead and create the associated view to actually show that information. I just did something really simple, and I made a candy cell.swift. Inside my candy cell, it's just a quick little struct. It has a var candy, which is a string, a var score, which is a double, and inside the actual thing is, of course, the required body. I put an H stack where I have a text, a spacer, the candy value, and then I use the string interpolation of the \parens around that double value score so it could show up as a percent reeking like that. And of course I have my preview right here so I can actually show how it looks. Let's go ahead and open up the preview so we can take a look at that. Using Alt-Command-Enter to open up our preview canvas screen. Hit resume and show this off. Successful build, and as you can see right here, we have a demo with sour gummy stuff, has a 93% success rate because of course it's amazing. Now that's just a quick little thing of how each cell will look. Now, so we have that quick little cell, now we can actually load that inside our data view. However, because this data itself is not identifiable, it doesn't conform to the identity have an ID variable in there so it would conform to identifiable, we have to do something a little bit different. So I'm going to go over to my data view, and let's go ahead and close that screen out. And so we had our previous one where we had the for each with the bucket store buckets, and we initialize each bucket in there. But because it's not identifiable, we have a slightly different structure for that. So we'll go ahead and pull that up right here. And so for that new version of that, we just added a section of that. So we have a section for our bucket store items and a section for the other one. If you're only storing one thing, of course, you only need one section, but that's easy to do. It's inside the list. And so we'll just collapse this out because it's a little bit different. We're not looking at it right now. And so all we have to do inside that navigation view, inside the section for my other data, in this case it's my candy section, I'll use a for each, but because it's not iterable on its own, I use the candy data.indices, which uses the built-in index of the list itself we're working with. And so I use the subscript notation, aka the square brackets, so I can get every individual value outside of that array and publish an associated candy cell from the associated values. And so for each index inside candy data.indices, I grab the index in that, and I create a new candy cell, passing it as the candy parameter, the candy data subindex.candy name, and passing for the score parameter, candy data subindex.win%. So I'm reading through all that data that's stored inside Candy Rank. I'm only using 2 of them because that's all I care about for the actual assignment, was that you could display 2 different values. And that way we can load that up and have it show up. And so if I go ahead and run my app again right here, inside the simulator, we scroll on down. We scroll past these lovely little guys. We have that other section right here. Just have to scroll past all of the bucket list items. And as you can see, my other data section, I have a lovely icon for my cute little thing, the name of the candy, and the win percent that it has. And so I can just scroll down through all of them. Because I have no functionality attached to this for extra features, when I click on it, nothing extra happens, unlike it does in the previous version. But as you can see, that section has had it right there. So I can see what those different components are, and I can see each of those pieces. And so that way I can load that information up and have it so I can access it using that other information. And again, that's the way we can get access to this. So just a quick review. Again, we had to make that candy rake, the associated struct that had all the data from the JSON itself. We put the JSON file inside our resources folder. We update our data file so we can load the JSON into a variable and use it as necessary. And then I make a candy cell. The candy cell is how I put those pieces in on display. And then I display each cell inside my data view. And I just have it right here where I'm using a section. And I use the for each, and I reference the candy data sub indices so I can talk to that actual variable inside custom data.swift. I can access the values using the subscript notation and then go on from there. And that's how you can add another data set inside your existing value and display something when you don't have an identifiable component, and you can still use a for each. Thanks again. Hope that was helpful. Have a great day. Cheers.